So today's video we're going to be talking about graphing sine and cosine. And we'll be using what we know about the unit circle. So if you keep the unit circle in mind, which I've drawn over here to the side, remember that we discovered that the x-coordinate of each one of these points is the cosine value, and the y-coordinate of each one of these points around the outside of the circle are the sine values. So just knowing these points on the x and y axis, we can kind of rough out the sine curve. So in other words, this graph here, I'm plugging in angles around the circle, and I'm getting out this y coordinate. So you notice on my x-axis I have this would be like pi over 2. This would be pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And notice those match up with the axes, because this would be 0, the angle of 2 pi over 2 here. If we spin around to this side, we have a pi, and etc. So these marks right here line up with the x and y axis where the circle crosses them. So when we're starting out sine, when the angle is 0, so if we're right here, the sine value is 0. So I'm going to grab a different color here. So I put a little dot right there. Then when I've turned pi over 2 radians, now my angle is right on that point, and notice the y value is 1. So that means I've gone up to 1 by the time I get to pi over 2. And then if I cruise on around the circle to pi, that would be right here, notice the y coordinate is 0 now. So I come back down to 0. And then I keep going around the circle, and when I get to 3 pi over 2, notice the y value is -1, so I'm down here at -1. And then finally, when I come full circle, the y value is back to 0, so that would be right there. And notice if I keep spinning around the circle, again, it'll come back up to 1 again. And it'll continue that same cycle. So we say that this, from 0 to 2 pi, that's one cycle of sine. And we also call it the period. The length of one cycle is called the period. So this period is 2 pi radians long. But also it's important to notice that it just keeps going and repeats the same cycle. So this would be at 5 pi over 2, it hits 0 again at 3 pi, and it just keep going like that, because we can keep spinning around the circle. So the sine curve, you do want to get to where you can draw this pretty quickly, but you can, since hopefully the unit circle is in your head, that it should be able to should be pretty easy to reproduce the sine curve anytime you need to. So let's take a look at the cosine curve. So we're going to use the same idea. We start out at angle equal to 0, and notice that the x value, because we're doing cosine now, so the x value is 1, so that means cosine will start up here at 1. So then when we spin pi over 2 radians, well, now the cosine is 0, so I put a dot right there. Spin another pi over 2, which takes me to pi. Notice the cosine is -1 now, so I'm down here at -1. Keep going around, we hit 3 pi over 2, the cosine is 0, so I come back up to 0. And then finally, when we come full circle, cosine is back to 1, so I'm up here at 1. And of course, once again, if I kept going, then the cycle would start all over again. So we're going to have something that looks like this. And of course, I could keep going because I've seen the cycle. All right, that's today's lesson.